My name is Vivienne Colt. I'm 32 years old, and I run a company that most people in this city have heard of, even if they don't know my name. 8 months ago, my husband walked out of our house while I was on a work call in the next room. He didn't knock on the door to say goodbye. He didn't leave a note on the counter or a text message or anything that would make a person feel like they mattered. What he left was a single envelope on the kitchen table with my name written in his handwriting. Inside were divorce papers, already signed. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I had known this man for 9 years. We met when I was 23 and he was 26, at a small restaurant, where he was waiting tables to put himself through his second year of graduate school. He was studying structural engineering. He used to sketch bridge designs on napkins during his break and slide them across to me like they were love notes. I kept every single one. We got married 4 years later. Our daughter Blythe had just turned 3 when he disappeared. She has his eyes and my stubbornness, and she was the first person I thought about when I opened that envelope, and the room started spinning. I should back up, because the leaving didn't come out of nowhere, even if it felt that way. My mother built our family's business from nothing. She started with a single consulting firm when I was in elementary school, and by the time I graduated college, she had turned it into one of the largest healthcare management companies on the East Coast. When she stepped back 3 years ago, she handed the reins to me. Not because I was the most experienced person in the room, because I was her daughter, and she believed in keeping power inside the family. I understood that. I respected it. But I also understood what it meant for my husband. My mother never said directly that she didn't think he was right for me. She was far too polished for that. But she had a way of looking at him at family dinners that made him feel like a stranger who had wandered into the wrong house. She called him your husband instead of his name, even after 8 years. She would ask him questions about his work in a tone that was almost kind, almost curious, and then pivot immediately to talking to someone else before he finished answering. He noticed. He always noticed. He was good at reading rooms, good at staying quiet when most people would have said something. One evening in the fall, not long before everything changed, we were at my mother's house for dinner. Blythe had fallen asleep on the couch in the study, and my husband had gone to check on her. My mother waited until we could hear his footsteps going up the stairs. Then she set her wine glass down and looked at me across the table. "You know your father and I almost didn't make it," she said. I wasn't sure where she was going. The difference was that your father understood what he was marrying into. He understood the responsibility. She paused. "Your husband is a good man, I'm sure, but good doesn't always mean right." I told her I didn't want to have that conversation. She smiled, the way she does when she thinks you're being naive. "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just saying that Robert Finch has been asking about you." Robert Finch was the son of my mother's oldest business partner. He had gone to the right schools, worn the right suits, and laughed at the right moments in every meeting I had ever attended with him. He had also been very clearly positioned in front of me at least a dozen times over the past 2 years, always by my mother, always with that same patient smile on her face. I told her that I was married. She said, "I know." And then she changed the subject. I didn't tell my husband about that conversation. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would hurt him more than it needed to. Maybe I thought I had handled it. I hadn't. 2 months later, on a Tuesday night in January, I was on a call in my home office. It had run long, the way calls with the board always did. I remember I could hear my husband in the kitchen at some point, the sound of cabinet doors closing, water running. And then it was quiet. I didn't think anything of it. I was making notes on my laptop and half listening to someone talk about quarterly projections. When the call ended, I went to find him. The kitchen light was on. The cabinet where he kept his favorite mug was open and the mug was gone. I thought that was strange, just for a second, and then I saw the envelope. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter. I read it twice, then I walked through every room in the house calling his name, even though I already knew. His coat was gone from the hook by the door. His side of the closet had holes in it where things used to hang. Blythe's overnight bag was missing from the shelf in her room. My daughter was gone too. I sat down on the floor of her room for a long time. I don't remember exactly how long. I called his phone over and over until it stopped ringing and went straight to a message that said the voicemail box was full. I texted every variation of, Please just tell me Blythe is okay that I could think of. Nothing. My mother arrived the next morning. I still don't know who called her. One of the house staff, probably. She walked in wearing her coat and carrying coffee from the place she always ordered from, and she looked at the envelope on the table and sighed in a way that was almost too composed. He took Blythe, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. She'll be fine, my mother said. She set the coffee down and picked up the envelope. He's not going to hurt her. He just wanted leverage. The word landed wrong. I stared at her. Leverage for what? She didn't answer. She was reading the papers. Mom. Leverage for what? You should sign these, she said, not as an answer. As a redirect. I took the envelope out of her hands. I'm not signing anything. I don't even know where my daughter is. She's with him, my mother said. She's safe. You know he would never harm her. Sign the papers, move forward, and we will find a way to get Blythe into a proper custody arrangement. I told her to leave. She didn't look surprised. She set the coffee on the counter and walked out, and I stood in the kitchen alone and tried to figure out how she had responded to all of that, without once asking me how I was doing. The months that followed were the longest of my life. I hired a private investigator within the first week. He found traces, a used car purchased in another state, a debit card transaction in a city 3 hours away, a school enrollment inquiry under Blythe's name that went nowhere because the address given was a P.O. box. My husband was careful. He moved often enough that every trail went cold before we could follow it. My mother stopped bringing up the divorce papers after the first month, but she started doing something else. She started telling people that he had left for someone else. Not to my face. Through the family. Through the network of cousins and business contacts and old friends who all eventually found a way to mention it to me, gently, as though they were breaking news I hadn't heard yet. I didn't believe it. I don't know how to explain why. Exactly. I just knew him. After 9 years, I knew the difference between a man who had left for another woman and a man who had left because something had forced him to. 8 months after he disappeared, I was driving to a job site outside the city. One of our portfolio companies had a distribution center under construction out near the highway, and I'd agreed to take the meeting there instead of bringing the site manager into the office. It was a cold morning. The kind where the sky looks white, not blue. I was walking across the lot with the site manager when I saw him. He was on the far side of the building, unloading material from a flatbed. His back was to me. He was wearing a gray jacket I didn't recognize and a hard hat and boots that were caked with mud. But the way he stood, the particular angle of his shoulders when he was concentrating, I had memorized that without meaning to. I stopped walking. The site manager said something I didn't register. I was already moving toward him. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. He turned just as I got close enough for him to hear my footsteps on the gravel, and when he saw my face, his whole body went still, like he had just walked into glass. We stared at each other for what felt like a long time. Then I said his name, and something in me broke open that I hadn't let break in 8 months. You have to leave, he said quietly. Not cold, urgent, afraid. I'm not going anywhere, I said. He looked around. The other workers had noticed us. He took a few steps away from the flatbed and lowered his voice. You shouldn't have found me here. Something hot moved through my chest. You don't get to say that to me. 8 months. You took our daughter and you've been. I gestured at the site, at his clothes, at all of it. What is this? What are you doing? Clara, don't. I hadn't cried in weeks and I wasn't going to start then. Tell me where Blythe is, right now. That's the only thing I need from you in this moment. He looked at me for a long beat. She's safe. She's been with my cousin in Vermont. She's in school. She's okay. The relief hit me so hard my vision blurred. I pressed my hand flat against the side of the flatbed to steady myself. She asks about you every day, he said. His voice cracked on it. I couldn't speak for a second. Then I said, why? Tell me why. He glanced around again. Not here. Here, I said. Right now. He took a breath. He looked at the ground for a moment and then at me. Your mother came to see me, he said. 3 days before I left. I went very still. She didn't come alone, he continued. She came with a man I didn't recognize. She didn't introduce him. He paused. She told me she had documentation. Financial records from the company, altered to show that I had been accessing accounts I had no business touching. She said if I didn't leave quietly, she would hand them to federal investigators and make sure the case was airtight. He stopped. She also said that if I made any noise about it, if I tried to fight it or go to you, she would make sure Blythe was placed with your family in any custody proceeding, that I would never get shared custody, that her lawyers would bury me. I heard everything he was saying. My brain was processing it, but part of me was still standing in my mother's kitchen, watching her pick up that envelope with perfect composure. Why didn't you come to me? My voice came out quieter than I meant it to. Because she told me you already knew, he said. He finally looked directly at me. She said you had agreed to it, that you wanted the divorce, and this was the cleanest way to do it without a scene. His eyes were exhausted in a way I hadn't seen before. I didn't want to believe her. But you had seemed distant for weeks, and I couldn't. He stopped. I didn't know what to think. And then I thought about what she had said about Blythe, and I panicked. I took her and I ran, and I've been trying to figure out what to do ever since. The machines on the site were still running. Someone shouted something across the lot. None of it reached me. I never knew, I said. I never agreed to anything. She was pushing me toward someone else. Yes, I knew that, but I did not know she had come to you. I did not know any of this. He looked at me for a long time. Something shifted in his face. The records she threatened you with, I said. Are they real? They're fabricated, he said. But she had them made to look legitimate. I didn't have the resources to fight it. I do, I said. He didn't say anything. I took out my phone and called my head of legal. I told him what I needed. Then I hung up and looked at my husband standing in the mud in a jacket I didn't recognize, and I said, I need you to tell me everything she said, every word you can remember, and then I need you to come home. The following week, I asked my mother to dinner at her house. I told her I wanted to update her on the business, on the custody situation, on my plans for the coming year. She was pleased. I could hear it in her voice on the phone. She thought I was finally coming around. She had people there when I arrived. Her attorney, 2 of her senior partners, her longtime advisor, the man she'd been quietly positioning next to me for 2 years, Robert Finch, was there too, standing near the fireplace with a drink, looking like he had already gotten comfortable in a future I had never agreed to. My mother kissed my cheek at the door. I'm glad you're thinking more clearly, she said. I smiled and followed her into the room. She introduced me to the group like I was a guest at my own life. She talked about the company, about the next generation of leadership, about the importance of strategic alignment. She was graceful and polished and entirely confident that she controlled every variable in the room. She was still talking when I set a folder on the table. Actually, I said, I have something to share as well. My mother paused. Of course, 8 months ago, I said, you visited my husband without my knowledge. You presented him with falsified financial documents and threatened him with federal prosecution if he didn't leave our family. The room went quiet. You also threatened to weaponize our custody situation against him. I opened the folder. I have a signed statement from him detailing that conversation. I have a forensic accountant's report confirming the documents you showed him were fabricated. And I have a record of the private investigator you hired to help relocate him quietly after he left. I looked up. Your investigator is very thorough. He kept very detailed billing records. My mother's face had not moved. She was too practiced for that, but something behind her eyes had. You told my husband that I had agreed to this, I said. I want everyone in this room to know that I did not. I did not agree to the fabrication of evidence against my husband. I did not agree to threatening him with the loss of his daughter. I did not agree to any of this. I closed the folder. And I will not be signing any divorce papers. The attorney was the first one to look at my mother. Then the partners. Robert Finch set his drink down on the mantel very carefully and didn't pick it up again. My mother finally spoke. You're being dramatic, she said. Her voice was steady. Everything I did was to protect this family. No, I said. You did it to protect the company. There's a difference. I picked up the folder. I've already notified our corporate board. I've also consulted with an attorney who specializes in fraud. The path forward will depend on a lot of things, but I want you to understand that I'm not walking away from this quietly. I walked to the door and then stopped. I turned around. You told him I had agreed, I said again. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the legal part. Just that. You looked at 9 years of a marriage and decided it was yours to take apart, and you thought I would never find out, or that if I did, I wouldn't do anything about it. My mother looked at me. For once, she didn't have a redirect. I walked out. His cousin's house in Vermont was a 4-hour drive. I left the next morning before it was light. I had called ahead, and when I pulled into the driveway, Blythe was waiting on the porch in her coat and boots with her hair in 2 uneven braids that her father had obviously done himself. She ran across the gravel and slammed into me so hard, I almost lost my footing. I held on and didn't let go for a long time. She smelled like wood smoke and the specific brand of shampoo I had shipped to them 3 months into the search when the PI found their general location. I had been sending things quietly, without knowing for sure if they were arriving. "I knew you'd come," she said into my shoulder. I pressed my face into the top of her head. "I know, baby, I know." My husband was standing in the doorway of the house. He looked like he hadn't slept well in 8 months, which was probably true. When I looked up at him, he looked back at me with that same expression he used to have when things were quiet and good, back when we were younger, and neither of us knew yet what it would cost us to love each other in the wrong family. We drove home together, the 3 of us. Blythe fell asleep against the car window somewhere past the state line. My husband and I didn't talk much. There was too much to say and no right order to say it in, and we both knew we had time to figure it out. That was the thing we had now that we hadn't had for 8 months. Time. My mother's legal team contacted me 6 weeks later. It was the beginning of a very long process. I won't pretend it was clean or quick, or that certain things didn't cost more than I expected. They did. The company went through a difficult transition. Some people chose her side. Some people chose mine. A few waited to see who was still standing, and then made their decision. I'm still standing. My husband went back to the engineering firm he had been with before all of this. He's working on a bridge project outside the city now. Sometimes he still sketches things on napkins at dinner, absent-mindedly, the way he always did. Blythe steals the napkins and tapes them to her bedroom wall. My mother and I don't speak the way we used to. Maybe someday that will change. I don't know. What I know is that she built something real, and she believed that protecting it meant controlling everything around it, including me. I understand the impulse even if I can't forgive the execution. What I also know is this. The man she called an obstacle, the man she forged documents against, and threatened and forced out of his own home, is the same man who spent 8 months working construction in another state to keep our daughters safe while he tried to figure out how to fight something he couldn't see. She never understood what he was worth. That was always her mistake, not mine.